The date is Tuesday, March 10. This is the news on PBCJ. I am Simone Absalom. The Ministry of Health and Wellness is currently monitoring a patient in isolation. The person of interest presented at hospital on Monday, March 9 with some respiratory symptoms, and checks revealed that the patient's travel history included travel to a country that has confirmed COVID-19. Samples have been taken and sent to the National Influenza Center for testing. The results will become available within the next 24 hours. As of Monday, March 9, there were 241 travelers who visited a country of interest before arriving in Jamaica. Notably, among that number, 7 persons are in home quarantine, while some 23 are in quarantine at government facilities. In the meantime, there are 105,586 confirmed cases of COVID-19 globally and 3,584 deaths confirmed. To date, Jamaica has no confirmed cases of COVID-19. A man who escaped from the COVID-19 quarantine center about 7:40 last evening is back in quarantine after he was captured by the police and a team from the Ministry of Health. He has been identified as Kemar Bailey. Reports are that about 2 a.m. Tuesday, officers received information that he was at a location in the Waltham Park area. The police said an operation was conducted and he was held in the company of a woman. Bailey arrived in the island on Saturday, March 7, and was placed at the quarantine center in Kingston. He asked and was allowed to retrieve a bag with personal items from someone at the gate of the facility. And whilst doing so, he jumped into the Whiteness and Tita motor vehicle, which sped off with him. Friends and relatives were advised that he is still within the high-risk period and they should not accommodate him if he turned up. The head of the World Health Organization says that while the threat of a global coronavirus pandemic is very real, the contagion can be contained. At a news conference Monday, the WHO Director General noted that there are more than 100,000 cases of the coronavirus across so many countries in the world. However, he said if COVID-19 becomes a pandemic, it would be the first such which could be controlled.
Over the weekend, we crossed 100,000 reported cases of COVID-19 in 100 cases. It's certainly troubling that so many people and countries have been affected so quickly. Now that the virus has a foothold in so many countries, the threat of a pandemic has become very real. But it would be the first pandemic in history that could be controlled.
The WHO director says a united and decisive effort across the globe is needed to slow down the spread of the virus.
The bottom line is we're not at the mercy of the virus. The great advantage we have is that the decisions we all make as governments, businesses, communities, families and individuals can influence the trajectory of this epidemic. We need to remember that with decisive early action, we can slow down the virus and prevent infections.
He pointed out that among those infected, most will recover.
Among those who are infected, most will recover. Of the 80,000 reported cases in China, more than 70% have recovered and have been discharged. It's also important to remember that looking only at the total number of reported cases and the total number of countries doesn't tell the full story, except the potential the virus has.
Prime Minister Andrew Holness has joined the call for missing University of the West Indies Mona student Jasmine Dean to be returned home safely. Jasmine, who is visibly impaired, left the UWI campus on February 27 and has not been seen since. CCTV footage showed her getting into a taxi at one of the exit gates at the university. Mr. Holness said he is saddened and, quote, personally hurt, end quote, by the situation. He was speaking Monday at the launch of the Spotlight initiative to eliminate violence against women and girls. Jamaica has formally launched its participation in the European Union and United Nations global multi-year initiative focused on eliminating all forms of violence against women and girls, the Spotlight initiative. Minister of Foreign Affairs and Foreign Trade, Senator Kamina Johnson-Smith, says Jamaica is among several countries in the region participating in the initiative, with focus on addressing all forms of family violence in the Caribbean.
We welcome in particular the key strategies of the initiative: to build on existing national programs such as the National Plan of Action for an Integrated Response to Children and Violence, to treat family violence as a public emergency, to empower youth and adolescent girls in particular, to engage men and boys, and of course, to improve data integration, accessibility, and quality, all of which are grounded in Agenda 2030 principle of leaving no one behind.
The initiative is so named as it brings focused attention to this issue, moving it into the spotlight and placing it at the center of efforts to achieve gender equality and women's empowerment in line with the 2030 Agenda for Sustainable Development. Director of Sustainable Development Unit at the Executive Office of the Secretary General at the United Nations, Michelle Giles-McDowell, says around the world there is an epidemic of violence against women and girls.
With 1 in 3 women worldwide having experienced physical or sexual violence at some point in their lives. And it is likely higher, as in many countries, as here, there is underreporting.
Giles-McDowell says that violence is a reflection of social norms rooted in inequity perpetuated within families, communities, and nations.
Centuries of patriarchy and male domination have left a legacy of inequality that affects private and public life, businesses and institutions of all kinds. In Jamaica, 1/5 of women report that they were sexually abused as children. 2 out of 10 of our girls aged 15 to 19 think it is okay for a husband or partner to hit his wife or partner. In 2018, 71% of girls under 18 who were victims of crime were raped. Much of this violence is perpetuated in the home, and evidence shows family violence disproportionately impacts women and girls.
The EU is the main financial contributor to the initiative. Other donors and partners were invited to join the initiative to broaden its reach and scope. According to the United Nations, the Spotlight initiative has become the world's largest targeted effort to end all forms of violence against women and girls. The Forestry Department has completed drafting instructions for the amendment of the Forest Act. Acting CEO and Conservator of the Forestry Department, Renee Oliphant, says even with the government's implementation of the forest policy of Jamaica, the agency, landowners and relative conservations were having a problem with sections of the legislation.
So there were some gaps that related to the types of offences or the types of activities that were deemed to be offences. There was a gap in relation to or regulations not necessarily tying in with what existed under the Act, and so there were some areas that we couldn't necessarily prosecute because it didn't refer to a forest reserve or a forest management area in the regulations, and so those are some of the areas. We also wanted to get an opportunity to increase the fines and also to have a layering of fines under the legislation.
The department has an active reforestation program that sees the planting of 100 hectares of denuded and degraded land, with $128 million being injected to fund forest business technical assistance to the Forestry Department. Principal Director for Forest Operations, Jerome Smith, says that number has been increased.
Under our national plan, our sector plan, we are mandated as an agency to plant 100 hectares of forest every year, And with the advent of the EU budget support, we have bumped that up to add an additional 50 hectares. So the target for this year, the financial year 2019-2020, which would have normally been 100 hectares under the sector plan, is now 150 hectares. And of that 150, we have done 133 to date, and we have another 28 to do by the end. And as was also mentioned, the majority of the trees that we'll be planting under the EU budget support, one of the targets says it has to be a minimum of 50% natives. And what we've actually done as an agency, we've actually taken that under the recurrent as well. So going forward, forestry is planting 50% minimum native right across the board.
Blue maho, Spanish elm, prickly yellow, Jamaican mahogany and cedar trees, and more are being planted. Ms. Oliphant says they have gotten good support from the communities so far.
Jamaicans generally have a genuine interest in doing reforestation activities. We have had situations where the private sector organization of Jamaica, for example, has committed to planting 500,000 seedlings over the 3-year period for the National Tree Planting Initiative. We have situations where just general members of the public come in, they collect their seedlings. The majority of the timber seedlings are free of cost to the Forestry Department, and so there's a genuine expression of interest from the public just coming in, whether it's Labor Day, whether it's National Tree Planting Day, or if they just want a tree in their backyard, they come in and they're encouraged to plant.
The project also aims to have a gender equality aspect.
It's required for Indicator 4 and 8. Indicator 4 being the activity that speaks to providing gender-sensitive alternative livelihoods. So far, we've awarded 37 of the targeted 40 projects, and 70% of the groups who've received funding have majority women involvement. We also have some youth as well being involved in that activity. And in terms of Indicator 8, which speaks to gender-sensitive public education and awareness, with the students which we've engaged so far, we're seeing about a 50-50% balance in terms of both genders being involved in the program and the activities. So for all the activities that we have engaged persons and that have gotten involvement from the public, we've sought to ensure that gender is foremost and the opportunities there for everyone to participate. So we strive to have women, men, and youth participate.
The budget support program will also build awareness of the forest sector by engaging communities living in close proximity to forested areas and promoting the impact of actions implemented. The police will soon be equipped with 100 Phablets as part of a pilot project aimed at improving the traffic ticket management system. The tool will allow for electronic recording of tickets, eliminating the need for manual data entry and enabling quick identification of dangerous drivers. The Phablet is a pocket-sized mobile device that is a bit larger than a smartphone. Minister of National Security Dr. Horace Chang, who recently announced the initiative in Parliament, said the machine will record the tickets and it will be connected to the Police Control Center, court offices, Tax Administration of Jamaica and the Island Traffic Authority. He explained that once a ticket is written in a Phablet, it cannot be removed from the system. It will have real-time connection to the police database so that vehicles that may be involved in criminal activities can be identified. There are more than 300 active gangs in Jamaica. As the island continues the war on crime, more research has shown that the profusion of gangs is a major contributor to the crime epidemic. Therefore, one way to stem or curb the issue is to root out the gangs that have embedded themselves in the society. In the second of a two-part series, our reporter Marlon Samuels delves into the problem as he speaks with crime, security and justice researcher at the Caribbean Policy Research Institute, Joanna Callan.
Research done in the United States by the American College of Pediatricians indicates that fatherless children are more likely to display violent behavior, twice as likely to drop out of school, and are most likely to become gang members. Through gangs, youth find a sense of community and acceptance. The gang leader may fill the role of a father, often leading members to model their behaviors. It is with this in mind that we look at the recruitment of gang members. crime security and justice researcher at the Caribbean Policy Research Institute, Joanna Cullen, explains.
They recruit members in several ways. The first is that, as I mentioned, especially in the first generation gangs, when they tend to belong to a specific community or geographical space, then there's that inclination of a group of young persons, who mostly males, who know each other, then they kind of come together to form that group, right? But we've also seen where school children are being recruited just because the gangs assume they kind of fall under the radar of the law enforcement. However, in that 381 gangs that JCF counts, that also includes school children or school gangs that have been established as well and might be affiliated with the older adult gangs. Then there's also the fact that gang members will recruit females, both their spouses, their partners, their families, to actually assist in gang-related activities.
According to the researcher, criminals will use inducements to lower potential recruits.
Especially in what is termed the second-generation gangs, where there is a more distinct form of leadership and more direction and hierarchy. You'll find we came across incidents where gangsters are actually sending and financing education and higher education for persons such as lawyers, accountants, computer science students, just because of the fact that they're able to then utilize their services within the operations of the gang.
The government of Jamaica has implemented several social intervention measures, such as the National Service Corps, to connect with unattached youths. The research conducted by the Caribbean Policy Research Institute, CAPRI, was launched on March 4 at the Terranova Hotel in Kingston. Reporting for the news on PBCJ, I'm Marlon Samuels.
Former Member of Parliament for Southeastern Clarendon, Rudyard Spencer, has joined the Industrial Disputes Tribunal as a deputy chairman. Mr. Spencer, a former president of the Bustamante Industrial Trade Union, will chair one of several panels of arbitrators employed by the IDT, which falls under the Ministry of Labour and Social Security. However, the former government minister explained that the appointment to the IDT is a temporary one, while the government continues to sort out staff issues at its embassy in Berlin, Germany. The House of Representatives paid tribute to Spencer February 4 when he announced his resignation weeks before a by-election was held to replace him. It was stated then that he would be moving to the Jamaican embassy in Berlin. There is currently no Jamaican ambassador in Berlin. The Jamaica Stock Exchange Combined Index advanced on Monday with an advance decline ratio of 1463. The index moved up by 0.59%. The JSE Market Index advanced by 1.01%, while the Junior Market Index declined by 137.68 points, or 5.43%. The JSE US Dollars Equity Index declined by 1.37 points, or 0.65%. Overall market activity shows 84 stocks traded, 14 advanced, 63 declined, and 7 traded firm. The US dollar is being traded at $135.05, down by 49 cents, according to the Bank of Jamaica's daily exchange trading summary. The summary also indicates the Canadian dollar is being traded at 100 Jamaican dollars, down from 101.52 cents, while the British pound sterling is being traded at $177.55, up from $175.61. In regional news, Panama has confirmed its first case of the new coronavirus. The patient is a Panamanian woman who had returned Sunday from Madrid. While only a few dozen cases have been confirmed in Latin America, the epidemic is growing in Europe. Spain is among 4 European countries with more than 1,000 cases each. Panama's health minister, Rosario Turner, said Monday the 40-year-old woman's positive test has confirmed at the Institute of Commemoratio Corgas. The woman is isolated at home and will receive daily visits from health workers. The virus that causes the COVID-19 illness has also been confirmed in the Caribbean, Brazil, Mexico, Ecuador, the Dominican Republic, Guadeloupe, Martinique, Argentina, Peru, Costa Rica, Chile, and there has been only one death. Barbados' acting Chief Medical Officer Anton Best says the government will focus on containing and curtailing the COVID-19 virus if it reaches their shores. We have more in this report from Barbados today.
Focus will be placed on containment and curtailing the spread of the COVID-19 coronavirus whenever it is identified in Barbados. Word of this from Acting Chief Medical Officer Dr. Anton Best, who says most of the countries around the world that have recorded cases of the virus have managed to stop the spread through this method. He made the position known during yesterday's estimates debate.
In terms of our strategies, we're looking at surveillance, we're looking at quarantine for persons who are deemed to be at high risk based on their history of travel. But the moment we detect that very first case, we have to put our energies and efforts into containment. So while we're expecting the worst case scenario, we're preparing as best as possible, and we do not anticipate that there will be such a large scale spread if we do what we're supposed to do in terms of containment. Many countries who have had single digits cases more than 2 weeks ago have remained at that level because containment works. If we were talking about a flu pandemic, containment is almost not an option because it's just not possible to contain the flu in the way that it's possible to contain COVID-19.
Responding to a question, Dr. Best also revealed that the Ministry of Health and Wellness had developed a plan to protect the elderly against the virus.
We actually do have a very clear plan as to what to do to protect the elderly. We recognize that the elderly population is the most vulnerable population in other jurisdictions. And in fact, it was just yesterday that we developed that plan of action as to what to do. I'm not at liberty to go into details, but I would like to respond by saying we do have a plan of action that's being implemented as of today in terms of protecting that particular population.
However, that answer was not sufficient for opposition leader Bishop Joseph Atherley.
Why would you not be at liberty to give us details on a plan for the care of the elderly in case we have a problem?
Minister of Health and Wellness, Lieutenant Colonel Jeffrey Bostic, responded saying input was needed from other ministries.
Let me say that the plan is not a secret plan, but the care of the elderly goes beyond the Ministry of Health and Wellness. It goes beyond health care. And we have completed our aspect of it in terms of health care. But we are now scheduled to have a meeting with the ministry with responsibility for elderly care so that we can then fashion out what we will then call the national plan for the elderly in relation to COVID-19.
The Dominican Prime Minister Roosevelt Skeritt is urging the public to stop spreading misinformation or fake news about COVID-19. He was speaking at a recent National Emergency Planning Organization or NEPO meeting.
In this era, we are bombarded with a lot of fake news, and sensationalism now has become part of the DNA of the society these days, and people get more excited when they see ignorant things being peddled on the social media, and they pay very little attention to facts and accurate information, and we sensationalize this thing. This is not a matter to bring any sensation. This is not a matter to take lightly. This is not a matter to make or to treat as any partisan political issue. This is a matter that each of us must take seriously, and it can impact any one of our countries, it can impact any one of us, it can impact any member of our family.
The Prime Minister said the government is in a state of readiness to confront the virus.
To say to you and to say to the citizens of Dominica, we are sparing no effort from the government standpoint. It is something that we treat with on a daily basis. The cabinet discusses this every Tuesday. We receive updates from the minister and to ensure that we have a mechanism of assessing and reviewing our preparedness every step of the way.
In sports, we swerve off with badminton. Samuel Ricketts and Shane Wilson wrapped up the 6th staging of the Jamaica International Badminton Open with a second-place finish in the men's doubles final to ensure that the country finished with 2 silver medals at the tournament. Playing with the full support of the spectators inside National Indoor Sports Center Monday, Ricketts and Wilson took on the more experienced pair of Solis Jonathan and Anibal Marroquin of Guatemala in the final match of the 4-day tournament. And that's the news on PBCJ. Thank you so much for watching.